Pokémon has NPC trainers for the player to fight along their journey so that the player can strengthen their Pokémon and progress through the game. These NPCs are characters with identifying classes that they belong to, which usually indicates the types of Pokémon you might expect them to use, as well as their appearance, dialogue, and location in the region. For example, hikers are often found in and around mountains and caves, often make comments about helping others, and believe it or not, climbing hills. They also commonly use rock, steel, or ground type Pokémon. Some NPC trainers appear more commonly in specific parts of the game. For example, you might expect to encounter more bug catchers in the beginning of the game near the early game forests where bug Pokémon are commonly found. Likewise, you might expect to see more fishermen or swimmers in and around the water. But who do you encounter the most on your journey through Pokémon? Certain sections of the games can feel like a slog through endless trainers, or stated more positively, a gauntlet. Is it the usual rocket section where you end up fighting half a dozen grunts before an executive? Or do the hikers in the frequently visited caves and mountains make up most of the battle EXP? I wanted to know, so I did a little bit of research and analysis to figure it out. The first problem I encountered was, as usual, data availability. Believe it or not, there is not a complete list somewhere stating how often each trainer class appears in each game. This data does exist, but in a more fragmented way, so that you can see that there are 11 beauties in Generation 1, but not, say, a table of beauties across all generations that you could easily plot onto a graph. So I once again had to open a spreadsheet and grind my way through Bulbapedia to collect the data that I wanted. A few things about the data that I want to note up front. I am more interested in the common trainer variants throughout the generations than I am the region-specific trainers. Some trainer classes only appear in specific regions, but hikers and youngsters are eternal. This inherently means that any region-specific trainers are going to be relatively uncommon, and trainer classes that appear in Generation 1 or 2 are going to be the most common, simply by virtue of having been around longer. A trainer class introduced in Generation 4 simply can't be a contender for most common because it had no chance of being in Gens 1 to 3. I did not really want to do this for all generations, partly because I just don't like making 25-minute videos, it's not my jam, so I decided to limit it to Generations 1 through 5. This is, to me, a big enough sample size to see some concrete trends while limiting the tediousness of collecting the data. I am also consciously deciding to include remakes in this count, despite the fact that it would mean repeat appearances of the same trainers. I did so because for players who have played most Pokémon games, you would battle those trainers twice as often, so they should be counted. I also consciously decided that I would only include core series games, so nothing from Colosseum or Stadium or Battle Revolution. Where the numbers differ between games of the same generation, I took the figure from the first releases, so Red and Blue, not Yellow, Gold and Silver, not Crystal, and so on and so forth. I also removed static numbered classes from the datasets. I don't need a tally for how many Elite Four members there are per region. There is always 7. Likewise for classes like Kimono Girls, Leaders of Evil Teams, and the like. And with those parameters in place, I was off. My first reaction looking at the data was, gee, that's a lot of trainer classes. With the very special trainer classes like Evil Team bosses and Game Freak developers removed, there are 107 unique trainer classes in Generations 1 through 5. This includes the overlapping classes that have changed through the generations, such as Cool Trainers being renamed Ace Trainers in Generation 3. But still, that's a lot. One other reason I cut it off at Generation 5 is that X and Y introduced 47 new trainer classes, which is just far too diluting of the existing 107 to get a meaningful trend. I would also note that across all generations, 1 through 9, only the Black Belt, the Hiker, and the Youngster appear in every game. Something that struck me when gathering the data was just how many trainer classes are specific to one or two regions. Classes like Bug Maniacs, Ranchers, Clowns, and the like. I don't really think it's a problem or anything, but it is striking how many distinct trainer classes Game Freak made for specific games that they decided against using again. I guess when you add 47 new trainer classes in one game, there's probably not much need to fill out the ranks with others. The flip side to this is that I did not at all need to look further when deciding what the rarest trainer class is. The Clown from Generation 4 only appears once on a specific day of the week. It's hard to get much rarer than that. On the evil teams, I was interested to see which game had the most grunt fights and was surprised at how much of a range there was. The Rockets peak at 50 fights in Fire Red and Leaf Green, but Ruby and Sapphire only manage a measly 21 grunt fights. Galactic Grunts and Plasma Grunts are 47 and 46 fights respectively, so we can say that it generally trends up from Fire Red and Leaf Green onwards. And that brings me to another point, the averages. And interestingly, despite not being in Ruby and Sapphire, Diamond and Pearl, or Black and White, Rockets are still the third most common trainer type across the generations 1 through 5. Having at least 30 grunts in each game that they appear in really bumped up the numbers. The headline figure here is that cool trainers are the most common trainer type, with an average of 30.4 per game, narrowly followed by swimmers with 21.8, rockets are a bit further down at 21.57, fishermen with 15.14, and hikers with 14.71. A couple of surprises here for me. There are 3 trainer classes that appear in every single mainline game: the hiker, the youngster, and the black belt. However, despite being the most consistently included classes, only the hiker is in the top 5, and none of them come close to the sheer overwhelming presence of the cool trainers. The youngster is only mildly more common than the bird keeper. The black belt comes in at number 11, not even in the top 10. So being reliably included does not at all guarantee that you'll be common in each game. The other thing here is that I felt validated in my decision to cut it off at Generation 5. Once you get that far in, it becomes clear that new trainer classes are unlikely to appear again in new generations, excluding if they get remakes. Many of the classes introduced in Diamond and Pearl are simply gone until Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. The same is true for trainer classes introduced in Black and White. The strange thing is that these classes only appear in these games, but at the same time, they don't appear a lot in these games either. There are 9 instances of trainer classes that only appear in those games once, meaning they're the trainer equivalent of legendary Pokémon. It's kind of odd that they chose to make a whole new trainer class and then only have them appear once, and not come back to them at all barring remakes. One other quirk with the trainer classes is how derivative they get of the first couple of generations. What is a Hex Maniac if not a slightly modified channeler? The Bug Maniac could never exist without the Bug Catcher. Is the guitarist really distinct enough from the musician to justify being a separate class? I don't really mind this, especially if it's explained that one becomes the other over time or something similar, but some of these trainer classes are just not that distinct from one another. One other interesting thing is that the appearances of different trainer classes isn't that consistent in the Gen 1 and 2 remakes. Between Red and Blue and Fire Red and Leaf Green, most of the trainer counts increase pretty substantially, with swimmers increasing by 133% and beauties decreasing by 42%. This is pretty easily explained by the addition of the Sevi Islands and other post-game content, but it's interesting to see that most of that change was funneled into existing trainer classes, rather than utilising the new trainer classes from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Likewise for Generation 2 and Heart Gold and Soul Silver. The change is there, but not as pronounced. The classes increased their number by about 25% on average, rather than the 34% average in Fire Red and Leaf Green. That's all I had to say on this one, folks. Did anything here stick out to you? Do you have an all-time favourite trainer class? Did I miss something really big and obvious? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel out and ensures you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, see you next time.